Muito boa tarde.
Good afternoon.
I
would like
ali
to
em cima
ask
que pudessem
up there
começar a colocar a
for them
minha
to show
apresentação
my
e
presentation
desde já cumprimentar,
and to greet
antes do mais, todos aqueles que estão
all
aqui.
the members of the panel who
A
are
minha parte
here.
é fazer uma
So my role
intervenção.
is to give you a
Não
short
é essa, é outra.
presentation.
A menos que a Susana queira começar.
It's not this one, it's the other one, unless Susanna wishes
Bem,
to start.
essa é a outra. Exatamente. Cumprimentar todos
To
aqueles que
greet
depois,
everyone who will
cumprimentar
then,
também a doutora
and
Susana
also
Catita,
Mrs. Susana
responsável
Catita,
pelo Centro
the
Ciência
person
CLP,
in charge of
que
the
fará,
CLP
tal como eu,
Center,
uma
who
intervenção
will also address
inicial
you,
que serve sobretudo
and the
também
aim is
para
to
aquilo que vamos em seguida discutir, para a mesa redonda.
give you the
Cumprimento
overview
todos
of
aqueles
the
que aqui estão,
discussion we will then have.
para essa mesa
So
redonda.
I invite you
E
all
também
to
cumprimentar
participate
o
in this
público
round
todo,
table and to greet
pelo
everyone
seu interesse
for
relativamente
their
a este
interest
tema.
regarding this
Eu
subject.
peço a vossa indulgência na medida em que, como representante
As
também da Organização dos
representative
Estados
of
Ibero-Americanos,
the Ibero-American
não falarei
States
apenas
Coordinator,
da
I will
questão
not only
da
speak about
ciência em
the
português,
issue of
falarei
the
de uma forma
science in
mais
Portuguese,
vasta
I
da
will
questão
speak
das
broadly
línguas,
about the languages,
falta ali um S, das línguas na
of
ciência,
the languages
isto
in
a propósito
science,
também de um estudo que
based on
também
a study
será em breve
that
lançado
will
em
be
Portugal,
soon
que já
be
existe, mas que
launched in
será
Portugal. It already exists,
lançado em
but will be
Portugal.
launched
O
in
português e o
Portugal. The
espanhol na
Portuguese and the
ciência,
Spanish
notas para
in
conhecimento
science, notes
diverso
for a
e
diverse
acessível.
and
E, de facto,
accessible knowledge.
a questão das línguas,
The
como
issue
eu
of
procurarei
languages, as I will
demonstrar,
try to
é muito
show,
mais
is
vasta
really
do
broader
que propriamente a questão linguística,
the
porque se
linguistic
prende
issue,
a outros
because it has
fatores,
to do with other
nomeadamente à
factors,
questão
namely
do
the
conhecimento,
issue of
do
knowledge
acesso ao
and the
conhecimento
access
e
to
também
knowledge
da
and
diversidade
also
desse
diversity
conhecimento.
of that knowledge.
Muito brevemente, todos nós sabemos
Everyone
que tem
knows
havido
that
fenómeno
we have had
que é
a
uma
phenomenon
cada vez maior centralidade da ciência
consisting in
nas
having a
nossas
more
sociedades,
centrality in our
e isso
society,
é, desde
a more
logo, visível
centrality of
pelo
science,
crescimento
which
do
is seen by
investimento
the
em
increase
em ciência e desenvolvimento e pela sua cada vez mais estreita ligação ao mundo, à economia. Aliás, as economias têm vindo a apostar neste binómio e nesta combinação entre investimento e ciência. E por isso,
and therefore,
hoje em dia
what
se torna também
today has become important is to know what is the investment that is invested in science and development, knowing that there are several and big differences, and therefore the development of different economies is so important. And also for us to have an idea on how this has been changing. During the 60s, the United States used to have 69% of their GDP an investment in science, and in 2018 they now invest 28%. So more and more regions are investing in science, however, not in the way we would like to. In the case of the whole Ibero-American region, right now the investment amounts to 27%, and with Spain, Portugal and Brazil are the only countries that exceed 1%. One group investing less, approximately 0.5% of GDP over the last decade. One of the efforts, namely the policies that we recommend, such as organization, is to invest more and more in science. Also to speak about in this Latin American space and thinking only in Latin America, and this reflection is important because we are speaking about Brazil. When we speak about science in Portuguese, we have to include Brazil. 70% of the investment in Latin America corresponds to Brazil. It's really a significant figure, and therefore we have to consider when we speak about science in Portuguese. On the other hand, there is a need to say that more and more languages are establishing partnerships, and this partnership, this joint work between Portuguese and Spanish has been very developed, and we wish, as an organization, that it can grow. That's why it's not just a linguistic issue, because there is a need to continue ensuring this diversity in languages, which is also a cultural diversity, many visions of the world, because when we write and produce science in several languages, we will convey through them several visions of the world. But we have to find systems that will not harm the quality of production, contributing to its internationalization. That's why we have to interrogate ourselves how to protect this diversity and at the same time to ensure access to open science, which is more and more a theme and a discussion. Thinking about this relation, as far as languages are concerned, we already know that the English language is really important and really is a major language in the production, disclosure and broadcasting of contents in English. Their presence, the presence of Portuguese and Spanish is also very important if we think about the database and the importance of data that to them are associated. So the Web of Science, the production in language, obviously it is a big production, declined for all the reasons we already know in 2020, but the truth is that we still have this growth. All researchers producing scientifically in English, and also in the Iberian space, both in Portuguese and Spanish, where approximately most researchers produce also in English. But in fact, we have to interrogate ourselves. This English language is okay, is useful. If English as a language of science is inevitable, and what are the consequences to the science? So it has always been questioned to have this scientific monolingualism. I would like to separate now the issues of scientific production, disclosure and circulation. Very recently, in a study that we also have here, well, we have realized that the language technologies and the work on scientific terminologies may make us to distinguish between production and disclosure, and then circulation of knowledge, which can be done in many languages. Nevertheless, although we know that the presence of English is very big, I would like to say that it is interesting to realize how Portuguese and Spanish altogether are the second publication language in the Web of Science website. As a second publication language, Portuguese and Spanish are here, and we can compare them with other languages. So, because the issue is mainly that we have Portuguese accounts for 250 million speakers, and the other one 500 million speakers, a considerable figure. But then what in fact happens is that the production, indexed scientific production of this universe accounts for 1%, and out of this 1%, we still have a lot of production in other languages. This concern of having an open science, a science that we only have in the indexed bases and in scientific magazines, private magazines actually, that have trade purpose. Maybe we will have open storage. It has become a strong recommendation by UNESCO. What happened with the pandemic was one contribution more, important contribution for us to understand that it's necessary for this knowledge to reach everyone. It is also essential to populations in general. So the UNESCO recommendation dated in November 2021, which was really expected with enthusiasm, was to value open science and to value the biodiversity and to encourage multilingualism in the practice of science. So I would like to also quote the Helsinki Declaration from 2019 of having scientific plurilingualism, drawing attention to the issues of databases for profit, when a considerable percentage of scientific production is made with public funds. This disconnection between a production made by public funds and then a circulation that happens to be private, in fact we see that more and more the movement goes towards an open science and access to knowledge that can also contribute to a global citizenship. And here the languages are essential. Now, this study that I am together with the Elcano Institute, Angel Badillo is going to also give a presentation on the 20th of May. The issue of linguistic diversity has to take into account another problem, the impact indexes and the issue of the evaluation systems. Both will have to be interconnected. And more there is a wide consensus of having alternatives to this system to be in place that has an impact in the linguistic impact. So the issue of linguistic diversity, not only we should have to take into account the issue of regions. If we speak about CPLP, it is very difficult for the science in English to come to this space. Does not reach researchers or citizens, and researchers are unable to be included in a broader system, but always under this perspective of open science with its implications in the social and sustainable development. And then this idea of consolidation of multilingualism, of eliminating barriers, namely linguistic barriers, and another. So today, more and more, we are working towards this purpose, using technologies, being able to have scientific production different from broadcasting and disclosure. There is still a lot to do, namely at the level of scientific terminology that have to be improved. For that, we will be able to use those instruments. But in fact, for a scientific citizenship, we will have to take into account open science and plurilingualism. Thank you.
Não, deixa estar. Eu tenho. Boa tarde. Posso pedir à Regi para colocarem a apresentação seguinte? Obrigada.
Good afternoon. My name is Susana Catita. I am the Executive Director of the Center CPLP, and I would like to greet my colleagues and those who are following us remotely, and also to thank FCT for the invitation. It is interesting that it's the third time we're here, and we've had an existence of 3 years, so it's very rewarding for us to be able to affirm ourselves as a center who disseminates science. So, talking about language, Fernando Pessoa, through his heteronym Bernardo Soares, had an expression, my homeland is the Portuguese language, which has been used to promote Portuguese speaking as a language spoken by a diverse group of countries. Portuguese is spoken by about 260 million people. It's the official language of 9 countries in the Portuguese-speaking community, and also spoken in Macau. An interesting fact, estimated by the International Institute of Portuguese Language, is that 7 million people who speak Portuguese live outside their home countries. So Portuguese speaking is not confined to these areas where Portuguese is spoken natively as an official language. As we've just seen in the presentation of Professor Ana Paula Burinho, I have some data which will also be shared in the publication that will be released on Friday, is the lingua franca of science. This is undoubtful, so the idea is not to revert this. It's the basic language of science. It's also the language that we use in meetings, so everybody's pretty much comfortable. But what we're doing here is to talk about Portuguese as a language of science. What can we do so that Portuguese doesn't lag behind as a language of science? As we can see, even though English is the dominant language in publications, it is becoming more important in the last 2 decades. What happens is that the number of researchers in Portugal has grown significantly in the last 2 decades. As you can see, since 2000, with 3.5 for every 1,000 active people, and in 2020, 2.9. So these are the numbers. It's undoubtful Portuguese can also be a language of science. Why? Because it contributes to strengthen identities nationally and collectively, such as the concept of Lusophony, to stimulate the scientific production without the language barrier. it has a very wide scope in African Portuguese-speaking country. It's very difficult to produce this. Also, another objective is to allow the access to scientific text to those who do not master the English language, since open science is such a relevant context. And also, we would like to project, this is an important goal, project science in the Portuguese-speaking world. How can we do this? On the one hand, we need to promote and support higher training, having more qualified people with degrees, MAs and PhDs, that we will have a wide scientific base, but also by stimulating and supporting scientific research development. We very well know that we also need to strengthen the qualification and capacity building of institutions. And finally, we need to increase and extend the dissemination of scientific knowledge. The LP Science Center operates within these action lines to stimulate and strengthen the higher qualification and the scientific development within the Portuguese-speaking country community and other African countries, within the values of UNESCO and in line with the SDG of the 2030 UN agenda. On the other hand, we would also like to take advantage and strengthen the existing synergies in academic and scientific communities. As I mentioned, we are a Category 2 center under the auspices of UNESCO. It results from an agreement between the Portuguese state and UNESCO. And we started in 2020, in March, perfectly coinciding with the beginning of the pandemic. We have a very reduced structure because we work with a university consortium. We're very aligned with these higher education institutions, but also with institutions in Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. One of our missions is to ensure the participation and the follow-up higher education students, scientists, and institutions. And the implementation of these objectives is guaranteed through academic and scientific networks. So we have these 4 lines of action. Advanced training. So we do this by giving a number over 100 grants, PhD grants annually. We also encourage initiatives for the development of complementary and cross-cutting competencies through summer schools. On the other hand, promoting R&D networks. There are several R&D networks. It needs to be strengthened, reinforced, to have an active role in these networks, and also to stimulate the creation of mixed teams and new partnerships that wish to apply for funding. A third dimension involves capacity building and scientific development with actions targeted to local capacity building. So, for example, most Portuguese-speaking African countries are particularly relevant for this, so that this is relevant for these countries, and to have a higher quality in their institutions. So also to strengthen the collaboration. Finally, last but not least, partnerships, scientific dissemination, and knowledge valorization, scientific debates in Portuguese, the merit medals, REN Science LP, and also the promotion of open science. Just to give you an overview what we've been doing since 2020 till now. So far, we have launched 6 competitions for PhD grants through the consortia. So we've had first edition, second editions. We will have third editions because we have 100 PhD grants annually. We also work regularly in using our website. Let me tell you that today we have launched the application guide, and I will use an application, an English term, the guidelines for candidates might look at an appeal for applications, a call for applications, and know what to do in order to gather the necessary documents and fulfill the necessary requirements. So this is available in our website, and it's also a contribution that we have to support our PhD students for African Portuguese-speaking students. And we are sensitive to any difficulties in dealing with Portuguese bureaucracy. Regarding consortia, these are groups of universities or higher education institutions within certain scientific areas. When we started, we had 2 consortia in engineering and farming sciences, but we have expanded and supported the creation of new consortia, biodiversity, public health, life sciences and biomedicine, and finally marine sciences. So we have a wide range of sciences. The center is positioned within UNESCO as a center supporting fundamental advanced sciences. Even though we have some of these universities that also act within social sciences. So this allows to support these PhD programs too. Just to give you an idea, in the consortia created within the Science Center LP, we have a number of universities and 2 polytechnic institutes. And as you can see, all the Portuguese universities and 2 polytechnic institutes, there is a very wide engagement of all the higher education institutions in Portugal. Just to give you an overview in terms of partnerships and initiatives, we were able to conduct 2 relevant initiatives because they project and promote Portuguese as a language of science. So this was in 2021. We had the first edition of the scientific merit medals to recognize the work undertaken by MA or PhD students in areas related to energetic transition, both to men and women. Another initiative which has been very rewarding is the debates, the science debates in Portuguese. It has been mostly online because of the pandemic, but we've had a hybrid session where we choose a currently relevant topic where we invite experts to debate the topic. This is a concern we have, having speakers from different Portuguese speaking countries. So, for example, 4 topics, we've had 10 sessions: agriculture, and men versus environment, technology, and health and medicine. My last slide, just to show you a little bit the current and future challenges we're facing, based on the interaction with the consortia, initiatives and partnerships. So, making sure that we have regular new competitions. We will also organize the first Science LP meeting, where all the stakeholders with an active role in this mission will be there. And we will also analyze the past 2 years, project the future, and strengthen our current connections. So, extracting the lessons, learning from them in order to plan the future. We will also organize a summer school in order to promote the development of cross-cutting skills. And this will be either face-to-face, virtually, or in a hybrid model with online modules, in order to allow an extended access. Something we are deeply concerned about, and we are very determined to tackle it, is to standardize and smoothen the procedures for the application procedures. So we need to recognize degrees undertaken outside Portugal. These are very complex processes. So we've been working very hardly with different institutions, with FCT, in order to find a functioning model that will allow to keep standards of quality, but that will make applications and the process of academic equivalence easier and smoother. Sometimes these processes take 8 or 9 months, which is not certainly good for those who are applying. Finally, this is a goal we are deeply committed to seek for new partnerships. We obviously are financed by FCT, but we also need to find further funding from the private sector, for example. So we need to find new partnerships that might inject funding. So the investment in science is very important. It mustn't come only from the public sector. The private sector is also important. That's why we're seeking new partnerships. So I think that through this set of measures, we will be able to project Portuguese as a language of science. Thank you very much.
Boa tarde a todos. Antes de mais, as minhas desculpas.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I thought the starting time would be 2:30. I would like to thank all the presentations that have been done before, to greet everyone in the panel. And now we will open a discussion period about the presentations already made. But before, I will give you some figures about the Portuguese language. If we consider languages in global terms, right now we have a common agreement that there are 12 global languages. There are 7,500 languages are spoken, 50% are under the risk of disappearing, and Portuguese is among the top 10. Only 2 or 3 figures. Why are we here? We are here because Portuguese should be with 270 million speakers, approximately 500 million by the end of the century. Africa will be the continent who will speak more Portuguese than Brazil, because Brazil is declining in birth rates, such as Portugal, and Africa is following the opposite direction. So, if we consider international variables, such as the number of speaking countries in official languages, Portugal is in the 5th position. If we consider in continents, we are in 2nd, together with France, and England is the one in the 5th. Spain has more speakers than Portugal, but they also have one of the 3 official languages in Spain is in 2 continents. If we consider working languages, translation, and official languages in international organizations and intergovernmental organizations, we are in the 4th position and 6th in the internet use. Just for you to have an idea of the ambition of Portugal of being the Portuguese being one of the global language in science, because there are languages that have more speakers than us, such as Inca or Bengali, but these languages are not even national languages, they are regional languages. So I think we have room to grow. Africa, it's good because the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa are key for the expression of Portuguese in terms of geostrategy of the languages. I don't know if you have spoken about this, but the current debate in the European Union about a new assessment criteria for science. Basically, here we have 2 basic lines. On the one hand, going directly to our subject, the big strength in multilingualism. Both UNESCO and the European Union have as political guidelines the reinforcement of multilingualism, and science also multilingualism, in addition to diversity of languages, the accessibility of society to production and science. One of the big failures of the impact factors is that, given the impact factors, we communicate with ourselves in practice. We are really concerned with our university careers and not as much with science, which is even more serious. In fact, the impact factors have conditioned the evaluation of university careers. Today, the Utrecht University don't use the impact factors in the evaluation of the university careers. In California universities, they don't use it either. So we also have the curriculum evaluation. The qualitative evaluation and not quantitative evaluation, taking into account precisely the social impact of the science produced, the involvement with communication for the public, for public opinion. This is a discussion that is being done in the European Union, and the issue of open science that has already been mentioned. So right now, taking into account these 2 factors, on the one hand, the weight of Portuguese in the world and its growth, maybe only Arab will be as much as the Portuguese in the 20th century. Spanish will decline, all the other languages will decline also, given the birth rates decline, and we will have an opportunity, because these new guidelines of the European Union, if they are approved, will give a very big contribution so that multilingualism will be affirmed. One last component to start the debate. What is the role, positive or negative, that the artificial intelligence and automatic translations will have in this area? Because, as far as I understood, about and taking into account everything I have read about the translators, the more texts in the language, in the automatic translator, the better the translation. The more we publish in Portuguese, the better will be the translation that is made in terms of Portuguese. The automatic translators are really progressing a lot, so this subject will be interesting to help in multilingualism. Since today we are celebrating the Museum Day, I would like to start with you. Please introduce yourself, and we will give you 5-10 minutes to go around. Good afternoon. I would like to thank FCT, but I thank the invitation because I am a monarch and a sporting affectionate. The ladies come first. I will only speak if the ladies will allow me. Thank you. I wanted to start this panel with a piece of the Pharmacy Museum, and taking the opportunity that this is today we are celebrating the International Museum Day. I would like to then invite you to visit our museums. We have outstanding museums. You should take advantage, because there we also do science in Portuguese. And I would like to start with a piece of art of the Pharmacy Museum. There is someone missing in this panel. Dr. Gregory House, because in 2016, Dr. House, in an episode, is able to find a disease who no one could understand. The disease was connected with a tropical disease, and the lady had never exit United States. And then Dr. House looks to everyone and says, this is a tropical disease known in Portugal through the Institute of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. All the doctors of that series made this question: how is it possible? How can you do that? Know that? Can't you read Portuguese? What is the episode, by the way? Please visit the Pharmacy Museum. Of course, the Portuguese language has always been a language of science. We have had always science in many areas, also in my area, museology. And museology is not only a science of exhibiting, but also of restoring, preserving, communicating, and also out of everything we have heard by Professor Ana Paula Labrinho and Professor Catita, there is something here that disturbs our history. We know how to identify the problems, we speak, and then we speak and then speak and speak. We understand the strategy, but then we don't act mainly in our language. We will always have this problem. We are unable to communicate our language. And sometimes I'm really concerned, because we speak about the Portuguese language and also the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, and we always forget something important. The Portuguese communities are not referred, and we have never made an effort, mainly by the Portuguese state, to come into contact, except in one case when there was an effort at all levels, even at the level of science, of getting in touch and understand who are the people who with Portuguese blood, within the Portuguese communities who are exactly capable of disclosing our knowledge. We are always limited to the issue of the Portuguese-speaking countries, and we always forget this Portuguese community. And then we are surprised when we see Portuguese television channels and we see Portuguese or Portuguese with Portuguese blood. And I ask again, where is the strategy, a national strategy, of getting in touch with those people, in addition to attending programs, to create opportunities to disclose knowledge through several institutions? It has been an ongoing failure. We speak a lot of our communities, but we forget our communities. And to end, I would like to give you a reference to this. APON, the Portuguese Association of Museology, which I'm here to represent, every year we give in the 32 categories we have in our prizes or awards to the several museums, to several distinctions. We have had a simple idea. It was very simple. We spoke with the professor and we said, Professor, is it possible to prepare a PowerPoint with the national territory or in which we disclose the best Portuguese museums spread all over the regions in order to be broadcasted in all centers of Instituto Camões? Reply, we have to have a permission. Okay. We showed a PowerPoint. There was no need for artificial intelligence. We had a lot of emails of people as we are, with people with Portuguese blood thanking, because they came to know that in their homeland they had an excellent museum. This is what we must do. Not only create partnerships, institutional partnerships and everything. Everything is important. Everything you said here is important. But we cannot forget that sometimes we meet our objectives using the simplest solution. And this is my proposal to this panel, to exactly think and to withdraw the simple things for us to be able to allow people to visit museums of science, because we have excellent museums of science in Portugal, and you will be surprised with the knowledge that they have. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you. Let's follow the same order, and then we shall end with Luís. Good afternoon. My name is Maria João Vargas Muniz. I come from the Applied Psychology Institute in Lisbon, ISPA, and I'd like to start by thanking FCT on behalf of Doutora Rosário. I'm not sure why, but she always remembers me. So in the panels I've been part of, I was the rapporteur for social area and citizenship. And the scientific work we've been developing is highly contingential, in the sense that on the one hand we have to be responsive at the forefront and to publish at the stratosphere. I had the privilege in the last 2 years to be almost exclusively in European projects. The last one was for homeless people, very contingential, in 8 different countries, 8 languages. So at the moment we have an incredible amount of information in 8 languages, and we're still working on it. The project ended in 2019, but we have a lot to deal with. An immense amount of work ahead in the stratosphere of K1 and K2 publications. It's a good rating for a research center, but we are at the stratosphere, so we have very little visibility in our own country. So what should we do? What are we doing? We're transforming all this material and giving it back to the community, because we have the contingency of having to produce basic and useful science in order to give back. So one of the areas I focus on is to do the advanced training of qualified professionals in transforming systems. This is what we do with contingent populations. We work with mental health. At the moment, I'm working with survivors of domestic abuse survivors. Even though Portugal has an excellent initiative, which is the Commission of Homicide Reviews, we work with survivors. So in order to work with these survivors, we have to give them back what we're doing. So at the moment, we have incredible amounts of information from focus groups, which we have been translating into English, which we will be then converting into Portuguese. So I spend most of my life lost in translation. Maybe it's not a disadvantage. I'm from the Azores. Half of my family lives in Brazil, half lives in the US. However, I think it's very important that we affirm the importance of the Portuguese language, but at the same time to be in the flow. So this is a dilemma. The issue of giving back in research, making it useful to population, especially in our areas. I work with people with severe mental health, with psychiatric hospitals, survivors of violence, education in remote areas. So it doesn't make any sense to give articles in English or to train professionals who have higher education. Things that they report to us is, well, I read, but I couldn't understand a thing. Because the language, all that, all the structural equations we have to do, which take years to develop, are not transferable to daily life. So how can I give back all this so that we can achieve the transformation of systems? This is our goal, the goal we committed to. We said in our application that our goal was to transform systems. So it's a permanent dilemma. And I'd say more than a dilemma, it involves some suffering. I was also saying if we had a large project, a Portuguese frontiers where we'd be able to publish in Portuguese and the publication would be recognized, because we have Cielo, it was a project born from this spirit, but it was absorbed by another project. So at the moment, at least in psychology, the scientific magazines are being encouraged to publish in English. So what we had left was already a small niche, but one of the magazines of my university, everything is now published in English. So as far as we know, we had a K4, it's not a K1, a K2. How can we curb this? How can we publish in Portuguese without having to share the scientific product? We have to translate everything we do. I spend 40% of my life on translation. I can't complain. I love translating measures. It's something I'm addicted to, translating scales and guidelines. And I encourage young people to also do that. It's very interesting to do research with younger and older students because they translate in very different ways. They even ask, what is this stuff? So they don't ask what fact is this, they ask what stuff is this. because we translate in a more careful, formal way, whereas the younger ones choose something which is might be even closer to SMS language. There's another translation-related drama, and this is also related to artificial intelligence. I sometimes review articles and sometimes these international publications. When quoting Latin references, they give us those articles so that we can understand the reasoning behind. These are sentences originally made by Latin languages speakers, but the construction of the sentence is sometimes faulty. So sometimes we need to consider these. How can we adapt to these questions? And this is the challenge we're facing. We have a very interesting allegory in the Finding Nemo film when a turtle is in the current and then jumps in and out. And we have this incredible world of the Portuguese-speaking world. So we have to take advantage of this. So it's a dilemma. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Cristina Brito. I'm here as an academic and as a director of the National Scientific Unit at the Nova University, a unit within humanities that hosts in a multidisciplinary way researchers of history and several fields of history, archaeology, literature, heritage, many people who try to understand what is being human and existing in a long chronology. In this condition, but also in the condition of researcher myself, coordinator of several European projects, we have been facing and also considering and thinking about the issues of Portuguese language, not only because we study the Portuguese world in the past, and therefore the presence of the Portuguese and the permanence of the language in extra-European spaces, the constitution of what is the Portuguese language in the world. This is one of our study objects, but we are, as a majority, the first or the second language. It's the way we produce research. On the other hand, as researcher and coordinator of projects, some of them in a network or consortium, including not only European Iberian colleagues, but also colleagues from many African countries, not only from the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, but also North, Central and South American colleagues. We have been facing with the difficulties of internal communication within the project, the dynamic of the project, difficulties to have a shared participation and dissemination. There are two poles: the need to produce, meeting the metrics, producing in English for the big international system, and to communicate and produce in Portuguese because it's our language, and it is the language that we communicate with our other partners. We communicate currently in English, in Portuguese, and in Spanish. These are the main working languages, although we also have Italian or other European languages, Asian languages, but this linguistic plurality becomes organic. If the European international projects, we have the obligation to communicate in English, with our funders in English, to produce in English, It's our responsibility, a moral and ethic responsibility, to ensure inclusively everyone who participates. Sometimes it requires that partners will not speak or communicate in English, and to host them we have to ensure the existence of several languages. Organic because it was natural. We started to have working meetings where we speak simultaneously the three languages, with translating by colleagues translating the languages. We have been doing publications. That is an important aspect, and we must mention that, to guarantee exclusiveness and the co-production with our colleagues outside Europe. Co-productions with scientific production is made through ensuring that the languages, original native languages of people, are present in our research dynamics. So to produce scientific articles in English, Portuguese and Spanish has become a common practice, with another effort for us, for those who more or less are fluent in the three languages and become interpreters. So it's an effort that we felt. It's a burden, but it's also our scientific obligation, not only to produce but also to disseminate, to disclose, to have others to listen, not for us to be closed in our scientific letters. It's a fundamental part of our investigation or research, communication of science, transposition of scientific information to other audiences, as mentioned, and we must do it repeatedly. So I finish, and I will pass on the floor to my colleague, just to say that we try to underline with our students in PhD, in master degrees or bachelor degrees, that Portuguese is a skill. It's a skill that not everyone has. Some people have, others don't. It's an important skill, however, that has to be valued in our curricula. It's a way for us to have a position outside in the Anglo-Saxon world as well. People who can contribute and give something else. This sharing, this return, the fact that we are able to have this possibility to communicate in a language as Portuguese, and the majority also in English and other languages, give us a fundamental role to be able to articulate that can ensure the growth of Portuguese as a language of science. Thank you very much.
Muito boa tarde.
Good afternoon. My name is Nuno Bicho. I am Deputy Dean in the University of Algarve. Until recently, I have been a director of an institution which Interdisciplinary Center for Archaeology, the Evolution of Human Behavior. I launched here a disagreement because the center was born with the name in English, but it was on purpose. And we will speak a little about that. Well, I am a deaf person who has difficulty with languages. I speak very bad Portuguese and I speak very little English. My life migrates from Portuguese to English and vice versa. There is another effort in this daily fight or struggle. I would say that my purpose is science. In a perfect world, science has no barriers, so we should not have a barrier such the language. But we know this barrier exists. We already know it, so we have to struggle with this. With no doubt, as a Portuguese citizen and someone in charge of a higher education institution, one of my missions is, with no doubt, to convey the idea that the Portuguese language is key in science and also as a language of work. As a scientist, I know also that if I only speak and publish in Portuguese, what I do will not reach many people. And I will give you my example. I am an archaeologist and I work in human evolution. Out of the 250 million who speaks Portuguese, what I do and write should be read, should be seen by 12 or 15 people. So out of the 250 million who speak Portuguese, I speak and write for 100. My science doesn't reach further. I have to write in the language that reaches everyone, and in this case will be the English. I will give you another example. Our center is a very tiny center, was born in 2014, had 10 people, the minimum number to be considered. The submission by our city had the difficulties during the first years to grow. Right now we are maybe 50 people among researchers and students, PhD students, and out of these 50 people, we have, if I'm not wrong, 19 different nationalities, and we speak more or less 10 different languages. Of course, when we go to the department in the Algarve, the only way for us to communicate is to communicate in English. That's the only way we can overcome the barrier. So it's good? Yes, it's good. It's bad? Of course it's bad. Our life considers these two aspects. If I want to make myself understood, if I want people to read what I write, so I will have to use the language those people understand. But I am providing a bad service to my language, native language, in a way. But fortunately, I'm creative as well, so I can do something else, and I should do something else. And science is not only research. I am looking to my colleague Cristina Pires, director of the Living Science Center in Faro, who communicates every day with many people, with students, very young students and older students. And what she does is to communicate science. And I use the Portuguese in this case. So my passage, the use of Portuguese, I use this mechanism, using this tool. In the Algarve, everything is bilingual. We are in a touristic spot, but Portuguese is there, reaches everyone, science reaches everywhere. So I would like to emphasize this duality. And to finish, I would like to say the following. I am pleased to work in Mozambique as well. I have a big project that will start next year, which will have a big impact in central Mozambique. When I started to work in Mozambique years ago, I thought, well, for what I have invested, Portugal is not enough. So I want to go to a place that does not have research in this area. I looked to the map and I said, Mozambique is perfect. It's an area that doesn't have research in my area, has potential, and I speak Portuguese. So I went to Mozambique. I was so wrong. No one speaks Portuguese there. I go out of Maputo and no one speaks Portuguese. If I don't have my Mozambique colleagues who speak, each one of them, 3 or 4 languages. When I leave Maputo city and go elsewhere, if I didn't have those colleagues with me, my Portuguese and my English were of no use. So when we go into those remote areas, languages have other meanings, and Portuguese is very limited, as much as the English, I must tell you. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, José Luís Cardoso.
Thank you, José Luís Cardoso. We have several hats. The one I'm wearing is of a social researcher of the Nova University, and this is why I have been invited. There are many things that have been talked about today. I'd love to talk about all of them, but we only have 10 minutes left. I would like to start by the issue of Língua Franca that Ana Paula mentioned. It's not irreversible, but this is not a battle that we should consider important. Otherwise, we should start questioning the FCT projects that need to be fulfilled in English. I think this is not the battle. We should accept that the 90% in the table you presented about scientific production in English are an indicator that we have to be with the international community so we can better disseminate our work. Let me give you 2 very concrete examples. So I work mostly with science and recently had 2 published articles in a Brazilian magazine, and I was very surprised. Without having taken any initiative, I received the text besides being reviewed also in English, and I was very surprised, and I understood that there is a policy of incentives to translation, but it was an incentive of the magazine itself. Another example is is an initiative I've been involved in, the Electronic Journal of Portuguese History, in cooperation with the Brown University, that only publishes in English. And the initiative was to facilitate those who can't read in Portuguese, the collaborators of Dr. House, so that they know and that they are better aware of our language. What Portuguese historians, what they say about reading nonsense about those who write about Portuguese history. So let's be brave enough to make them stop doing so. And I completely agree between the difference between production and dissemination. And then there's the problem of translating from Portuguese into English and vice versa. I think we should have a policy of incentives, and there should be institutions which have the right capacity to actively and strategically promote the necessary incentives so that the scientific production in Portugal might be known, and if there is a language barrier, abroad. I agree greatly with Luís Reis said about artificial intelligence. There is no possible comparison with what was done a year ago and nowadays. So we're talking about algorithms. So the larger the databases, the better the translation. So when I insert a sentence, we're not the machine will not be translating isolated words, but a sentence which has been inserted before in the same database. So, and also wearing the hat of being the hat of the new president of the Science Academy of Lisbon. We are not a scientific academy for production, but for dissemination. So tomorrow we will have a session on Henrique Oliveira and Maria do Carmo Fonseca, and they will speak in Portuguese, as obviously. But yesterday we had Paul Krugman, and the conference was in English, naturally. And it's not because that there wasn't simultaneous translation available, that the conference didn't take place. So I think that in promoting scientific knowledge, the Academy has an important role, and investing in Portuguese as a language which can reach a wider audience. So I repeat, the academia and the academics is not intended for production. The Academy is a stage, a platform for diffusion and communication of science. What else can we do? What else was done here about open science is what I've been trying to focus in the strategic positioning. So the openness of science and the openness of its heritage which is very vast in terms of the Portuguese language policy. It's the institution that should be consulted in sovereign organs for language matters. It doesn't mean that it has been so far or in the best way, but my intention is to demonstrate that the Academy can do it by making available, for example, online, an orthographic vocabulary of Portuguese language, which is mostly consulted by Brazilians. From the end of the year, making available a contemporary dictionary, which is an update, which will be accessible for all online. So making available its collections, its archive, its manuscript collection. Nowadays, it's possible through the website to have access of the catalog of old books published in the 19th century and to download, but I might be on the right road, but to download using the English term, all the PDFs in digital formats of the manuscripts of the Science Academy. And I would like to end by sharing another example. Besides dictionaries, so terminology is also very important. There are members of the Academy who've been working in life sciences, and they've been producing this thesaurus, these terminology, these classification systems. So scientific terminology produced by scientists to fix in Portuguese, establish in Portuguese. Should we say DNA or should we say ADN in Portuguese? So once and for all, to set it in stone, we should have some standardization. So before concluding, let me just share another example. The Science Academy of Lisbon had the privilege to host 2 weeks ago an important collection, the donation of Camões Library, which belonged to the family of Manuel Queiroz Pereira, an important businessman. And what's the most interesting thing, the Academy holds a first edition of the Lusíadas, but this collection does not include a first or second edition, but it has a third one. And what made us accept this donation was that it has an impressive collection of translation of the Lusíadas from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. And I was so impressed. I didn't know that there were 2 different translations in Swedish, 2 different translations in Hungarian, in Arab, Mandarin, a number of different translations in Russian besides European languages, which makes this Camões collections a true success, are the translations. And we shouldn't read the Lusíadas as we read them in Portuguese, but giving the possibility of making the Lusíadas accessible in other languages, something that was done from the 17th century by different nationalities. So we have this concern as the text of the Lusíadas. So this is the best example to show there is a universal language, which is the language of knowledge, which is the language of literary production. We can use it in several nation languages, but the important thing is to make knowledge more accessible in a perspective of open science. Please allow me what has just been told about Mozambique. On May 25th, the International Day of Portuguese Language, this is a UNESCO initiative thanks to the commitment of our ambassador, our then ambassador, Sampaio da Nova. He's a member of the Academy, and he made a wonderful presentation about the challenges of the expansion of Portuguese as an international language. And we had the participation, the Brazilian Academy, the Angolan and Mozambican academies. It was completely different, the register, the tone from the Brazilian and African academies. And in fact, the problem of the academies, from the African academies, is the problem that you've just told us. It's not so much the language of affirming, but how can we manage the obstacles, also in promoting the native languages. If you think about the millions in Africa which will be Portuguese speaking, we should start planning this. This is a true problem, this is a true obstacle, the connection of Portuguese in an African context, and then the multiplicity of languages to the point of the Angolan and Mozambican academies, thinking that there is a problem of colonization. This is a political problem which demands a strategy so that the 400 million that will be achieved in 2050 might be counted not through the number of inhabitants, but the true number of speakers in those countries.
Bem, estamos em cima da hora.
We're nearly ending. I thought we would have some time left for debate. Just 2 or 3 notes from what has been said today. I'm not as pessimistic. According to the last census in Angola, 71% of the population says they speak Portuguese. In Mozambique, 30%. It has to do mostly with the civil war in Angola, which forced Angola to rapidly urbanize. When we have 7,000 languages in the world, it has to do with demographic pressures. So, for example, in the Pacific region and in Africa, have not coincidentally the highest number of languages. So urbanization leads to this process in Angola. And nowadays, what is being defended by UNESCO and by the organization of Ana Paula Laborinho is bilingualism in education, in the native language, and in the official language. Because if it's not done through the official language, it can also lead to marginalization, because the official language gives access to opportunities, especially in higher education where there are no books and manuals in Makua, for example. One of the main reasons is also to reduce academic failure, because if they are not educated in their mother tongues, it will be more difficult. In Timor and in Mozambique, the problem exists. Ramos Horta gave an interview where he says that 1% during Indonesian occupation spoke Portuguese, nowadays 30%. So education will be in charge of expanding this number. When I was directing ISCTE and I had to publish in a Brazilian publication, I wanted to do it in English, but I wasn't allowed to. They made me publish in Portuguese. I think this is a good example for ACT, because if we consider other contexts, I'm sure that Spanish is always present, even though, so we need to take it into account other realities where I would also like to advertise something, if you don't mind, and it's related to the topic. I'm currently managing a a project. It's an exhibition by the municipality of Cascais, 450 years since the first edition of the Lusíadas. And for the first time last year, there was a publication in an Islamic language, in Turkish. Because, as we know, Camões is not very kind to Muslims. And also, because of Dubai, there was a language. So we will be doing a small exhibition in Fort Santo Antônio da Barra, where Salazar fell off his chair, which is called Lusíada. The Lusíadas go back to the east, with translations in Turkish, Arabic, in Bahasa Malay from Indonesia, with also Hindi and Japanese and Chinese. So for the 10th of June, if you wish, you can visit the fort in Cascais and visit the exhibition. Just to conclude, the issue of Spanish. I know we've had a battle somehow, Nepal and I. What is the benefits of a bilingual edition, or another language possibly, in disseminating Portuguese? If we put Portuguese and Spanish together, we are the second language community in the world. Mandarin comes after. Not all Chinese speak Mandarin. So what incentives should be created for creating magazines in Portuguese and Spanish, bilingual text? Because the community will then be expanded, because there is a very strong proximity between the two communities. This is an issue I'd like to raise for future debate. Thank you very much.